In this episode, Golden and I discuss the Disney Plus series Hawkeye. Full speed ahead.
The Omega Beam. Full power. The Omega Beam.
Welcome to the Omega Beam number 155. I'm your host, Orrin Merton. Happy New Year! At the end of this episode, I'll talk a bit about our plans for 2022. But right now, let's talk about the last Marvel Cinematic Universe series to air on Disney Plus in 2021, Hawkeye. This series takes place after the events of Avengers Endgame and directly after the post-credits scene in Black Widow, but that is explained during the course of the series. So if you haven't seen those movies, you still can enjoy the series. So like we tend to do with television shows, we do start for the first few minutes spoiler-free. This whole series is only 6 episodes, all streaming on Disney Plus, and they're each less than an hour. So if you haven't seen it, please go watch it, come back, enjoy all our spoilerific discussions, and let's get going. I am here with Golden to talk about the latest Marvel Disney Plus TV show, Hawkeye. So, Hawkeye is in many ways the Avenger that kind of gets laughed at a little bit, maybe put at the bottom of the heap because he's not a super god and he doesn't shoot lasers from his hands. But I would have to say, he makes a pretty good TV series.
He's an extremely talented human.
He is. He's an extremely talented human.
Not to say that there aren't other extremely talented humans, but Tony Stark had a lot more resources, I think, than Hawkeye ever did, and was smart or talented in a different way.
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it.
Same thing with Nat.
Yeah, Hawkeye's whole thing is that he is an amazing shot. And it's not even with an arrow. We see in the series, I mean, I guess we should start spoiler-free, but this isn't a huge spoiler to say that he can throw / toss / shoot things that aren't just arrows, and they'll go exactly where he wants them to go.
And he's very usually aware of his surrounding, even though you do have the fact that it is basically brought up in the very first episode that he's wearing a hearing aid.
Right.
Because his hearing has been affected by everything. Yeah,
I think that's one of the endearing things about Hawkeye, that he is a human, and that means he can't just get up and brush off the kind of damage that, a super god from space can.
And Marvel definitely is keeping with a theme for 2021, and that would be trauma, and overcoming trauma and dealing with trauma.
And Hawkeye's sure had a lot of trauma when it comes to his family blipping away, him losing his best friend. I mean, there's definitely a lot. I mean, beyond the physical trauma of just a human body taking all this punishment, there's the emotional trauma of what he has endured as well. And this, I think, again, spoiler-free just for a tiny little bit. If you haven't seen it, it's streaming right now, and go watch it because it's 6 episodes. Almost all of them are less than an hour, so it's probably 5 hours.
Only 6 episodes?
I know. And it was probably 5 hours of TV, and it was just so good. If you're not already familiar with Haley Steinfeld, who plays Kate Bishop, who you may know from the Hawkeye comic is the other Hawkeye, this is sort of her origin story, and it is done incredibly well. If you are familiar with the Matt Fraction David Aja comic that they did, I think 24 issues long, years ago, that won pretty much every award the comic industry has to offer and was absolutely amazing in every way. They take a lot from it, although it is its own story. It's not an adaptation. It's its own story, but it takes a whole lot of elements from that story.
Which just means that, Disney should pay David Aja more than just...
Right. I hope they do. I mean, I know that Matt Fraction got consulting producer credit, which I hope came with some compensation as well. And I hope they compensate David Aja. He absolutely deserved it. In fact, for those of you who know the comic, you will also immediately see that not just do some of the elements that they took look exactly like his design, like Kate Bishop's apartment and things like that, but also the graphics, the title credits and the title graphics, they are his style. And they lean on it. and it's fantastic. And all creators should get paid. And I hope they pay him. So yeah, it's incredibly well acted, incredibly well written, great cast, great story.
If you've enjoyed the other Marvel series, then you're definitely going to enjoy Hawkeye.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely agree. So I'm pretty much ready to get into spoilers. So 3, 2, 1, last chance if you haven't seen it. 1, okay, spoilers. We pretty much knew that Florence Pugh, who plays Yelena, was going to be in this one. And if you saw Black Widow, then you saw that she was sort of tasked with assassinating him. And
just because, there were a lot of sirens in the show, we just thought we'd throw some extra sirens in.
So, yeah, I thought she was so great in Black Widow, and I was so excited to see her in this one. She just gives that character such a vibrancy and such a life. And this is the origin story of Kate Bishop, the female Hawkeye. But it's also kind of her origin story, even though Black Widow was her introduction. She was really a sidekick in that one to Natasha. And I think this was sort of her coming into her own. Yelena's coming into her own, yeah. And I think it was.
Well, she was hired to do this, but it's because she still is carrying around her own trauma, not wanting to believe that Nat is gone, that Nat would leave, that there was a choice.
Right. Like you said, this is about trauma, and her trauma was that she was desperate to believe that if Clint Barton didn't kill her, then
he's
responsible for the fact that she's dead. And Clint Barton is obviously carrying around a ton of trauma, but the instigator of the whole story is the trauma related to Ronan, that he spent 5 years as basically a mass murderer of criminals, and he hoped he could just walk away from it and become a family man again. But, of course, the Ronan suit, when it gets out in the public again, becomes a...
Well, Kate Bishop ends up taking the suit, and then people think Ronan is back, and then that brings in the tracksuit mafia.
Right.
And opens up an entire giant can of worms. And even when the suit's not with Kate Bishop, now it's with these other people who are LARPers, and that in itself, watching Clint Barton walk into a LARPing and having to join the LARPers in order to get to the person who has the suit is highly entertaining.
It is, and that's a great opportunity.
And I'm glad they didn't abandon the LARPers.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is a great moment to say that I think there's a lot of comedy in this. And even Kevin Feige has said that he would love to see Hawkeye become sort of a holiday staple, that he would love to have this, that there's a reason it's lighter in tone, even though it can get dark. It's because he always envisioned this as a holiday series. And Christmas is very integrated into it. It's not simply it takes place during Christmas. I mean, Christmas is a thing, and that includes humor. And I think the best genre comedies, and I'm thinking specifically of Galaxy Quest, they poke gentle fun at the fans, but the fans end up not as targets of cruel jokes. They become a beloved aspect. And I love how in Hawkeye that originally, or at the beginning, Clint is like, oh my God, LARPers? Really? He doesn't even know what live action role playing is. He just sees these people playing swords and he's just like, oh my God, do I have to go into these people?
Do I have to wear the helmet?
Yeah.
Do I have to wear the armor?
Yeah.
I have to use the sword?
Yeah, he's like, this is just crazy. But by the end of it, he's relying on these people and he realizes how valuable they are. And they're in real life, their day jobs. They're like cops, they're firefighters.
Well, they're valuable not only in that aspect, but also in bringing about him actually seeing himself as a superhero.
Yeah.
Because I think before he just saw himself as part of the team, but maybe didn't see himself as individually as a superhero.
And I think the line he says to Kate Bishop about how he views himself when he said, I'm a weapon. I just happen to have been aimed by good people. That's probably all he saw himself as. So when he became Ronin, as far as, he's concerned, now he's basically a sort of murderer who kills murderers, but he's just being a weapon. He's continuing, as he said, he's continuing doing what he knows how to do, to be a weapon. And as you put it, seeing himself through Kate Bishop's eyes, through the LARPer's eyes, he realized that he wasn't just a weapon, that he was an inspiration, that he gave more than simply violence. That he gave meaning and purpose.
Yeah, and Kate makes the comment in that last episode that she sees this guy fighting aliens with string and a stick, and just leaps off a building, and he can't fly. There's just this faith and understanding that he can do anything.
Yeah, and what made that line so poignant, in Kevin Smith's Fat Man Beyond, he talked about how it brought him to tears, and I get it, because that's when you realize it's not about the trick arrows, that he has all kinds of trick arrows, and they're so cool, but that it's about his spirit, his internal spirit, because it doesn't matter how much tech you have. If you don't have enough spirit to fight an alien with a stick and a string.
He also has faith in himself and his abilities.
Yeah. That kind of training leads to confidence. And that kind of confidence leads to being an inspiration.
And you're talking about, there's a little bit of comedy. It's the relationship between Yelena and Kate Bishop is just absolutely just fun to watch.
It is fantastic.
At first they end up at Kate Bishop's place, and Yelena's adding hot sauce to her macaroni and cheese, which I guess Florence Pugh actually ended up adding a whole bunch of hot sauce to it. But then they're in the middle of a fight scene, and I like that when you flipped over and then you flipped me up. And they're appreciating each other, and there's a little bit of respect there, even though each one of them has a different objective.
Right. I think that's one of the things that made this show so amazingly watchable. I mean, there's even that moment where one of the tracksuit mafia is thanking Kate Bishop for good relationship advice in the finale. And it's just, it's that kind of a show. I mean, there is seriousness, there is darkness, but it is...
But again, in the end, last episode, where are all these tracksuit mafia coming from?
Yeah.
I mean, it was ridiculous amounts of them.
Right. For those who aren't familiar with the comic, the kind of tagline for the comic that was on the cover, the pitch, if you will, the elevator pitch for why Matt Fraction bothered to do 2 years of Hawkeye, of all the people, when he was, at the top of Marvel's game and they could give him anyone. I think he did Iron Man, everybody else. His tagline was, "This is what Hawkeye does when he's not being an Avenger." And it was all about the day-to-day kind of sitcom-y, life of him. And in the comic, the LARPers were, he ends up renting an apartment in this tenement. And in the comic, the LARPers were the other residents of the tenement. And Grills, they had similar names and things like that, even if they didn't have the same job. And it was all about him just being a guy. And I think that they kept that from the comic. In the comic, it was the Tracksuit Draculas. They turned it into the Tracksuit Mafia here. Kingpin was still the big bad. It was still, one of the great things about the comic that Jeremy Renner and Haley Steinfeld played so well is this is about kind of a father-daughter dynamic. And ultimately, that is why Hawkeye trains her. That's why Hawkeye becomes her mentor.
It starts out that he needs her to find the suit and maybe find something else that's missing.
Yeah.
It ends up being the sword, the suit, and the watch.
Right. And just that dynamic, it's just fantastic. And those two actors do it so well. I mean, I happen to have read that they actually had a wonderful on-set relationship, and Haley Steinfeld's an adult. I mean, she's not a child. There is the parent-child thing because Jeremy Renner is a father of a daughter, and it just all worked. It just all played incredibly well. Apparently, it was a very joyous set, and that everybody enjoyed to be there. And it comes off. You see it on screen. You see those relationships on screen. Even when Hawkeye is fighting, the person who we initially think is the big bad, Echo, there's no hate between the two of them. She's trying to help him. She's deaf, and she's like, you might do better without the hearing aid. Don't rely on technology. Speaking of technology. So, there is just a real joy there.
He understands where her pain is coming from, and he wants to help her.
Yeah.
Even when she's beating the crap out of him. And she just won't give him the chance to actually talk to him.
Right. Even when he is afraid that she may potentially hunt down his family, he refuses to kill her. Because he's not that person anymore. He wants her to make better choices, to have a life.
And he gives her information where she's able to find out that what she thought happened with her father and blaming Ronan is not just, it's not that simple.
Right. And that is a wonderful segue to one of the wonderful reveals in this show, is that now that Marvel has the rights back to the Netflix verse of Marvel shows, they introduced Kingpin in this one.
Just a little different style Kingpin.
Yeah, this is much more the comic Kingpin.
Yes. Which is therefore why the Hawaiian shirt.
Yeah, because that's a Spider-Man tie-in from a Spider-Man comic. And he's got the super strength, and he's got the diamond cane, topped cane.
But we keep the cufflinks.
We keep the cufflinks,
and the cufflinks come into play in the last episode.
They do. Vincent D'Onofrio just did such a amazingly wonderful job. And he has gone on record as saying just how much that part means to him. And he totally puts it all out there on the screen, and it is wonderful.
I'm still kind of wrapping my head around, and I know that doesn't mean as much to you, that he was the mechanic / Thor in Adventures in Babysitting, because it's kind of humorous that he's the opposite end or opposite side.
Well, he's always had a little bit of love for the comics, maybe. But yeah, so
and he had hair.
He did. He had hair, or at least a wig. I don't know.
I don't know.
But he did have a wonderful, though limited, role in this one. He only showed up as a picture in episode 5, and of course the villain in episode 6, the big bad. I've heard one criticism that if you didn't know he was Kingpin from the Marvel shows, it wouldn't mean as much, that he's just this guy who shows up as the big bad and then is gone. But I think Vincent D'Onofrio did such a good job of carrying the weight and the size of Kingpin, of Wilson Fisk, that even if you didn't know who he was, either in the comic or in the Daredevil show on Netflix, you would still have just felt this is a larger-than-life villain.
No, I thought he did a great job. I like him not being in every episode. I like just that lead up to the reveal of him, even if you were expecting him.
Yeah. So Echo is clearly getting her own series. It had already been announced that there's going to be an Echo series. So she's going to get her own series.
Which is great. You have it headed up by someone who is deaf and a partial amputee.
Right.
I think it's
and
great.
Native American.
And
so,
Native American.
So
and
diversity, everything. It's all there. And she's amazing. She's a revelation. She's fantastic. She was everything you want. And I remember you were telling me, you'd read an article that in order to make her feel better, that the cast had all learned
I don't think it was all the cast. I think
it was just Jeremy Renner.
I think Jeremy Renner and maybe Kingpin. I mean, because Kingpin signs with her.
Right. So a few of the cast members, in order to make her feel more at home and welcome, had learned some American Sign Language in order to communicate with her, which I thought was just really sweet. So, yeah, Echo's getting her own show. Obviously, Yelena is going to be probably the Black Widow going forward in the MCU. Kate Bishop is clearly set up for the future. Some people
I want to just watch a show that Black Widow and Hawkeye.
Oh, absolutely.
The two of them.
Oh,
because I
what
think
a
it
wonderful
would be,
buddy show that would be.
I think it would be fun.
It would be. And Haley Steinfeld, I mean, I've enjoyed her in literally everything I've seen her in. Movies, on television, she's just a fantastic actor. And she absolutely inhabited this role and was absolutely fantastic. And, of course, Florence Pugh is one of the best actors in the MCU right now.
The entire cast was very well cast.
Yeah, absolutely.
I enjoy the relationship between her mother and her mother's fiance, and which one of them's really the bad guy, and
right.
She knows that he's lying, and in some ways he's lying at some points because he just wants to be accepted by her.
Right.
He doesn't want to show off. He doesn't want to make it seem like he's showing off because he wants the daughter of his fiancée to like him.
Sure, and it's one of those things where they are both shady. It's just that his shady is more of a patsy shady, whereas her mother, Eleanor, she's a real murderous criminal.
And she's been hiding it.
Yeah. And she says it's all for you, it's all for you, but that only goes so far. At a certain point, it's for her too.
Yes.
And, again, that actress played it incredibly well. One of the things I also liked about this show is that we're so used to in the MCU, so many things are giant size, that you're saving the world, you're saving the galaxy, you're saving the universe, you're saving reality. He needs to get his suit back and clear his name. It's a smaller, more personal
Well, it's not
story.
clear his name, just keep that information.
Right, keep that information private. Exactly. And I like that. I like the fact that we could have a nice 6-episode show that's very personal, they don't travel the world. The whole show takes place in one city. And it's
trying to get him home for Christmas.
Yeah, trying to get him home for Christmas. And it's a tight, well-written, well-acted. The visuals are great, though there aren't nearly the kind of special effects you get in some of the other shows or obviously the movies, but lots of good stunts.
And like we said, they have their humor in the right place.
Yeah.
They start with this musical, which he turns his hearing aid off because he doesn't really want to listen to it. I think he does that. And then at the very end, during the closing credits, they will go ahead and sing you a song.
Right.
And you get to hear the song, and you get to see the characters. And one of the songs by the New Yorkers are saying, would have been nice if you chose a different battleground.
Right.
Well, we'll like you for now, but then afterwards we're going to be very upset. I think there's also a line in there about, yes, let's save the city and then go for shawarma.
Right.
I mean, they definitely pull out all the stops,
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, this is a great little series. I look forward to watching it again. I don't know if I'd watch it every holiday season, but certainly I'll watch it again because it's just so watchable and so much fun. It's definitely a winner of the Marvel series, and I'm glad that they made it. And I was like so many others who, when they first announced they're doing a Hawkeye series, I was like, okay.
And we are definitely leaving out details and other things that we enjoyed about it. There just isn't enough time, and you might as well just go watch it.
Right, just go watch it. Yeah, it is one of those things that there's a lot of little Easter eggs and things like that. If you see it, if you're a Marvel fan, there's a lot to get into here, and it's a really, really enjoyable show. Well, thank you, Golden.
You're welcome.
And that's it for this episode. You can find the show notes at theomegabeam.com/155. If you liked this episode, please leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Your reviews help people who like this stuff find our podcast. So our basic plans for 2022 are to keep on discussing our favorite sci-fi, fantasy, and superhero genre picks in TV and movies. We'll occasionally continue to have guests and special episodes for, conventions, milestones, interesting topics, and stuff like that. Theoretically, we should hit our 200th episode this year, so that's certainly worth a special episode, and that's the kind of thing that we intend to keep doing. Speaking of milestones, this year we surpassed 50,000 listens to our various episodes, and thank you all so very much for listening. We don't have any kind of huge corporation or sponsor, whatever, getting us out into the world. So we rely on you, and really, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for being on this ride with us. We love doing this. We love hearing from you on our social media, and there might be more of that going on in 2022. We'll see how that goes. And thank you for helping us get the word out. If you have any comments or suggestions, please drop us a line at info@theomegabeam.com. Be good to yourselves and each other. Have a great, great 2022, and we'll catch you next time.
The Omega Beam. Full stop.